Hi, it's Natasha and Co. It is the 6th of June, 1622, reading from M. Peck, People of the Lie. I'm reading chapter The Encounter with Evil, chapter 3, and I'm finishing the first subsection, which is called The Case of Roger and His Parents. So I'd read up to page 106, where the author has set up the situation about him in school, and the letter from his principal has been received by him asking for his help. And that was from Mary Rose OSC, the principal. So I'm going to read on from page 106. When the family came for their appointment, I saw Roger first again. As before, he appeared depressed. What was different, however, was a faint hint of hardness. There was a touch of both bitterness and false bravado in his manner. He didn't know why he had broken into the old priest's room. "Tell me about Father Jerome," I asked. Roger looked slightly surprised. "There's nothing to tell," he said. "Is he a nice man or not a nice man?" I pressed. "Do you like him or dislike him?" "He's okay, I guess," Roger answered, as if he'd never considered the question before. "He used to invite us to his room sometimes for cookies and tea. I suppose I like him." "I wonder why you would steal from a man you like." "I don't know why I did it, I told you." "Maybe you were looking for some more cookies," I suggested. "Huh?" Roger appeared embarrassed. "Perhaps you were looking for some more kindness. Maybe you need as much kindness as you can get." "Nah," Roger exclaimed toughly. "We were just looking for something to steal." I switched the subject. "Last time I saw you, Roger, I recommended that you go to a psychologist, Dr. Levinson. Did you ever see him?" "No." "Why not?" "I don't know." "Did your parents ever talk to you about it?" "No." "What do you make of that? Doesn't it seem strange that I recommended it and then you and your parents never mentioned it again?" "I don't know." "We'd also been talking the last time about the possibility of you going to a boarding school," I said. "Did you and your parents ever talk more about that?" "No. They just told me I was going to St. Thomas's." "How did that make you feel?" "It was all right." "Would you still like to go away to boarding school if you had the chance?" "No. I want to stay at St. Thomas's, please, Dr. Peck. Help me to stay at St. Thomas's." I was surprised and touched by Roger's sudden spontaneity. Clearly the school had become important to him. "Why do you want to stay?" I asked. Roger looked confused for a moment, then thoughtful. "I don't know," he said after a pause. "They like me. I feel that I'm liked there." "I think you are, Roger," I responded. "Sister Mary Rose wrote me and said very clearly that they liked you and want you to stay. And since you want to stay, that's probably what I'll recommend to her and to your parents. By the way, Sister Mary Rose said you were doing some fine work with retarded children. How was your trip to New York?" Roger looked blank. "What trip?" "Why, the trip to the conference on retardation. Sister Mary Rose told me you'd been funded to go. It seemed to be quite an honour for someone not yet 16. How was the conference?" "I didn't go." "You didn't go?" I repeated stupidly. Then I began to feel a sense of dread. Intuitively, I had an idea of what was coming. "Why didn't you go?" "My parents wouldn't let me." "And why was that?" "They said I didn't keep my room clean at home." "How did that make you feel?" Roger appeared numb. "All right," he said. I allowed a note of courage in my voice. "All right? You get awarded an exciting trip to New York City all on your own merits, and then you're not allowed to go, but you tell me it's all right? That's a lot of crap." Roger looked very unhappy. "My room wasn't clean," he said. "Do you believe that the punishment fitted the crime? Do you think the fact that you didn't pick up your room was sufficient reason to deny you such an exciting trip, a trip you had earned, a trip that would be educational for you?" "I don't know," Roger just sat there dumbly. "Were you disappointed? Angry?" "I don't know." "Do you think that maybe you were very disappointed and very angry, and that maybe that had something to do with your breaking into Father Jerome's room?" "I don't know." Of course he didn't know. How could he? It was all unconscious. "Do you ever get angry at your parents, Roger?" I asked softly. He kept his gaze riveted to the floor. "They're all right," he said. If Roger's depression was unchanged, so was his parents' urbane composure. "We're sorry to have to bother you again, Doctor," Mrs. R announced as I led them into my office after seeing Roger. She sat down and removed her gloves. "We don't mind being here," she smiled, "but of course we did so hope for Roger's sake that something like this wouldn't be necessary again. You've received correspondence, I believe, from the principal?" I acknowledged that I had. "My wife and I are very worried that the boy is well on the road to becoming a common criminal," Mr. R said. "Perhaps we should have taken your advice and sent him to that doctor you recommended. What was his name? It was a foreign-sounding name." "Dr. Levinson." "Yes, as I said, perhaps we should have sent him to your Dr. Levinson." "Why didn't you?" I expected the answer would be well prepared. Returning to see me, they would have known the issue to be unavoidable. Indeed, they had wasted no time in raising it themselves, but I was curious to hear their response. "Well, you left us with the impression that it was up to Roger," Mr. R replied facilely. "I remember your saying that it was his life, or something like that, and then I know you talked to him about it. When he expressed no enthusiasm about it, we assumed he did not want to go to see your Dr. Levinson, and we decided it would be better not to press the matter. Then we were also concerned with Roger's self-esteem," Mrs. R contributed. "Since he was already doing badly in school, we were worried what effect his seeing a psychologist would have on his confidence. Self-esteem is so important to young people, don't you think, Doctor? But perhaps we were wrong," she added with a charming little smile. It was clever. With a few words, the issue of their not following through with my recommendation had become a combination of my own fault and Roger's. There seemed to be no point in arguing the matter with them. "Do you have any idea why Roger might have become involved in this stealing incident?" I asked. "None at all, Doctor," Mr. R replied. "We tried to talk with him, of course, but he wouldn't give us anything to go on. No, we're at a total loss." "Stealing is often an angry act," I said. "Do you have any idea why Roger might have been angry or resentful lately? Angry at the world, or angry at the school, or angry at you?" "No reason that we know of, Doctor," Mrs. R answered. "Is there any interaction that you can think of that you had with Roger in the month before his stealing that might have made him angry or resentful?" "No, Doctor," Mrs. R answered again. "As we told you, we're at a total loss. I understand that you wouldn't allow Roger to go on a trip to New York to a mental retardation conference during the Christmas holidays," I said. "Oh, is Roger upset about that?" Mrs. R exclaimed. "He didn't seem upset when we told him he couldn't go." "Roger has great difficulty expressing his anger," I said. "It's a large part of his problem. But tell me, did you think that he would be upset when you wouldn't let him go?" "How should we know? We can't predict that sort of thing," Mrs. R responded with faint belligerence. "We're not psychologists, you know. We just did what we thought was right." A picture flashed before me of the endless strategy sessions Mr. R attended in the councils of power where politicians made and discussed just such predictions. But again, there would be no use in fighting the issue. "Why did you think it was right not to let Roger go on his trip to New York?" I asked. "Because he won't pick up his room," Mr. R replied. "Time and again, we've told him to keep his room clean, and he just won't do it. So we told him he was not fit to be an ambassador abroad when he couldn't keep his own house in order." "I'm not sure what being an ambassador abroad has to do with a weekend trip to New York City," I said, becoming exasperated. "I also think your expectations in this regard are unrealistic. Very few 15-year-old boys keep their rooms neat. In fact, I would worry about them if they did. It doesn't seem to me an adequate reason to prevent a young man from going on an exciting educational trip that he has earned by his own efforts in a worthy field of endeavour." "Well, we have some questions about that, Doctor," Mrs. R said gently, even sweetly. "I'm not at all sure it's right for Roger to be working with those retarded children. After all, some of those children are mentally ill too." I felt helpless. This chit-chat is all very nice, Mr. R pronounced, but we've got to get on with it. Something's got to be done or the boy will become a common criminal. In the summer, we were talking about sending him away to boarding school. Would that still be your recommendation, Doctor? No, I answered. Back in June, I was sufficiently uneasy about it to recommend that Roger ought to see Dr. Levinson before making a definite decision. I don't want to absolutely rule out boarding school, but I'm even more uneasy about it now. Roger likes his new school. He feels cared for there, and I think it would be quite traumatic for him if he was suddenly removed. I see no need for anything to be done precipitately, so once again, I would recommend that Roger see Dr. Levinson. That just puts us back at square one, Mr. R exclaimed, obviously annoyed. Don't you have anything more definitive to recommend, Doctor? Well, I do have one other recommendation, I said. What's that? I strongly recommend that the two of you go into treatment. I think Roger needs help very badly. I think that both of you also need it. There was a moment of deadly silence. Then Mr. R smiled a slight, amused smile. That's very interesting, Doctor, he said equably. I would be very interested as to why you think we need treatment, as you put it. I'm glad you're interested, I responded. I'd thought perhaps you'd be upset. I think the two of you ought to get into psychotherapy yourselves because you really seem to me to lack empathy for Roger, and your own psychotherapy would be the only thing I can think of that might enable you to understand Roger better. Really, Doctor, Mr. R continued equably and urbanely, I do find your recommendation intriguing. I'm not boasting, but it seems to me I've been quite successful in my profession. My wife also has been rather successful. We have no problems with our other child, and my wife is very much a community leader, you know. She's a member of the zoning board and highly active in church affairs. I'm intrigued as to why you might consider us mentally ill. What you're saying, I paraphrased, is that Roger's the sick one and the two of you are healthy. It's quite true that Roger is the one whose problems are most visible. But first of all, Roger's problems are your problems. And from my point of view, everything you've done to cope with Roger's problems in the past years has been wrong. Roger wanted to go to boarding school. You refused him without looking into the matter any further. I advised that you take him to see Dr. Levinson. You rejected that advice. And now, when he was rewarded for his own role in community affairs, you refused him his reward without even thinking of the effect it might have on him. I'm not saying that you consciously want to hurt Roger, but I am saying that from a psychological point of view, your behaviour indicates that on an unconscious level, you have a good deal of animosity toward him. I'm glad to hear you refer to your point of view, Doctor, Mr. R said in his smoothest lawyer's manner, because it is just your point of view, isn't it? And there might be other points of view, mightn't there? I will admit I am beginning to feel a certain amount of animosity toward Roger now that he seems to be becoming a common criminal, and I know that your psychological point of view might hold us, his parents, to be responsible for every little nasty thing he does, but it's easy for you to point the finger at us. You haven't sweated like we have to give him the very best education and the most stable of homes. No, you haven't sweated at all. What my husband's trying to say, Doctor, Mrs. R said, joining in, is that there might be some other explanation. My uncle, for instance, was an alcoholic. Isn't it possible that Roger's problem has been inherited and that he's got some kind of defective gene, that he would have turned out bad no matter how we treated him? I looked at them with a growing sense of horror. You mean, isn't it possible that Roger's incurable? That's what you're saying, isn't it? Well, we'd hate to think that he's incurable. I should hope that there'd be some medicine or something that could help him, Mrs. R said calmly. But we certainly can't expect you doctors to have found a cure for everything, can we? What could I say? I had to remain scientific, detached. There are many psychiatric conditions that are wholly or partially inherited and genetic in basis. There is absolutely no evidence, however, to suggest that Roger's difficulties are part of any such condition. My diagnosis in your son's case is that he is suffering from a depression that is not hereditary and not incurable. To the contrary, I believe his difficulties are completely curable if he is helped to understand his feelings and if you can be helped to change the way you respond to him. Now, I cannot guarantee that my diagnosis is correct. It is a best guess based upon my experience and judgment. I would estimate that chances are 98% that my diagnosis is accurate. I cannot tell you that it is 100% accurate. If you are distrustful of it, you should get additional consultation from another psychiatrist. I can recommend several others to you, or you can seek one on your own. But I must tell you that I do not believe there is much time. While I think his problem is curable with the proper help at present, I'm not sure it will be if he doesn't get that help very soon. So it is just your opinion, isn't it, Doctor? Mr. R was boring in on me in his best trial lawyer fashion. Yes, I acknowledged it's just my opinion. And it's not a matter of scientific proof, is it? You think, but you do not know what Roger's problem is. That's right, isn't it? Yes, that's right. So it is in fact perfectly possible that Roger has a hereditary, incurable condition that you are not able to diagnose at this time. Yes, possible, but hardly likely. I paused to light a cigarette. My hands were shaking. I looked at them. You know, I said, what strikes me about all this is that the two of you seem more eager to believe that Roger has an incurable illness, more willing to write him off than to believe that you yourselves might be in need of treatment. For a fraction of a second, all I could see was fear in their eyes, pure animal fear. But within an instant, they had recovered their urbanity. All we're trying to do is to get the facts straight, Doctor. You can hardly criticise us for wanting to separate fact from fiction, can you now? Explained Mr. R. Many people are afraid of entering psychotherapy, I commented, feeling as if I were attempting to sell Bibles inside the Kremlin. It's a natural reluctance. No one is eager to have his or her inner thoughts and feelings examined, but once you get into it, it's not so fearful. If it would make it any easier for you, I would be willing to work with you myself. It would break my rule that I do only consultations, but I would do anything in my power to see that you and Roger get the help you need. I certainly did not expect that they would take me up on this offer, and one part of me certainly hoped that they wouldn't. But I felt compelled to make it. Much as I found the notion of trying to work with them distasteful, I could not in good conscience automatically refer them to someone else. Now at least 7 years after the case of Bobby, I had some idea of what I would be up against. Oh, I'm sure you're right, Doctor, Mrs. R said amiably, as if we were chatting at a tea party. It would be pleasant to talk about oneself and have someone to lean on, but is it so terribly time-consuming and so terribly expensive, isn't it? I do wish we were in the upper income bracket so we could afford it, but we have 2 children to educate. I'm afraid we simply don't have thousands of dollars to spend year after year on an art form. Whether you are in the upper income bracket, I do not know, I answered her, but I do know that in all probability you are covered under the federal government insurance program, which offers the best benefits anywhere for outpatient psychotherapy. Probably you would only have to pay a fifth of the cost of treatment yourselves, and if you are still worried about the expense, you might want to consider family therapy, in which a therapist would talk to you and Roger together. Mr. R stood up. This has been a most interesting conversation, Doctor. Yes, most enlightening, but we've taken quite enough of your time, and I must be getting back to my office. But what about Roger? I asked. Roger? Mr. R looked at me blankly. Yes, he's guilty of breaking and entering. He's doing poor academically. He's depressed. He's frightened. He's in trouble. What's to become of him? Well, we're going to have to give a lot of thought to Roger, Mr. R replied. Yes, a lot of thought. And you've given us a lot to think about also, Doctor. You've been most helpful. I hope I have, I said, standing up as well. The interview was clearly being terminated whether I liked it or not. And I do hope you'll give serious thought to what I've recommended. Of course, Doctor, Mrs. R purred. We'll give everything you've said serious consideration. As before, Mr. and Mrs. R attempted to prevent me from talking to Roger again. He's not a piece of furniture, I insisted. He has a right to know what's going on. So I spent a few final moments with Roger. I found out that he still had my card in his wallet. I said I would call Sister Mary Rose and advise that he continue at St. Thomas's. I told him I had recommended that he should still see Dr. Levinson. I also told him I had recommended therapy for his parents. You see, Roger, I said, I don't think it's all your problem. I think your parents have psychological problems that are at least as big as yours. I don't think they try very well to understand you, and I don't know that they will get the help you all need. Roger was, as expected, non-committal when we parted. 3 weeks later, I received a cheque in the mail, enclosed with a note from Mrs. R on her tasteful personal stationery. Dear Dr. Peck, you were so kind to see us again last month at such short notice. My husband and I truly appreciate your concern for Roger. I wanted to let you know that we have followed your advice and have sent Roger to boarding school. It is a military academy in North Carolina and has an excellent reputation for working with children with behaviour problems. I am sure things will be better from now on. Thank you so much for all you have done for us. Very sincerely yours, Mrs. R. That was 10 years ago. I have no idea what happened to Roger. He would be 25 now. Occasionally I remember to pray for him. One respect in which it is difficult to write about evil is its subtlety. I began with the case of Bobby and his parents because of its obvious clarity. To give a child his older brother's suicide weapon is an act of such gross outrageousness that anyone would think, yes, that is evil, all right. But there was no such grossly outrageous act committed by Roger's parents. We are dealing only with trip permissions and school choices, the ordinary kind of decisions that parents routinely make. Simply because the judgment of Roger's parents in these matters differed from my own may not seem grounds for labelling them evil. Indeed, might I not be guilty of evil myself by so labelling clients who disagree with my opinions and fail to take my advice? Might I not be misusing the concept of evil by facilely applying it to any and all who oppose my judgment? This problem of the potential misapplication of the concept of evil is a very real one and will be considered at some length in the final chapter. Certainly, it is my obligation to justify my conclusion that Roger was the victim of evil. It is particularly important for me to do so because of the two cases, Bobby's and Roger's. Roger's is the more typical. While evil may manifest itself obviously, as in the case of Bobby, it rarely does so. More commonly, by far, its manifestations are seemingly ordinary, superficially normal, and even apparently rational. As I have said, those who are evil are masters of disguise. They are not apt to wittingly disclose their true colours, either to others or to themselves. It is not within reason that the serpent is renowned for his subtlety. It is exceedingly rare, therefore, that we can pass judgment on a person as being evil after observing a single act. Instead, our judgment must be made on the basis of a whole pattern of acts as well as their manner and style. It is not simply that his parents chose a school against Roger's wishes or contrary to my advice. In a period of a year, they made 3 such choices consecutively. It is not that they disregarded Roger's feelings on a particular occasion. They did so at every possible opportunity. Their lack of concern for him as a person was utterly consistent. Still, is this evil? Might we not say that Mr. and Mrs. R were remarkably insensitive people and leave it at that? But the fact is that they were not insensitive people. Highly intelligent, they were finely tuned to social nuances. We are not talking of poor dirt farmers in Appalachia, but of a well-educated, gracious, politically sophisticated couple, quite adept in the committee and at the cocktail party. They could not have been who they were had they lacked sensitivity. Mr. R would not make an unconsidered legal decision, and Mrs. R would always remember to send flowers on the right occasion. But Roger, they would not remember or consider. The fact is that their insensitivity toward him was selective. Conscious or unconscious, it was a choice. Why? Why should they make such a choice? Was it merely that they did not want to be bothered with Roger, and that all their reactions to him were predicated on what would be cheapest and easiest, rather than on what he might need? Or did they actually, in some dark way, want to destroy him? I do not know. I never will know. There is, I suspect, something basically incomprehensible about evil. But if not incomprehensible, it is characteristically inscrutable. The evil always hide their motives with lies. If the reader reviewed my account of the interactions that Mr. and Mrs. R had with me, she or he would find somewhere between 1 and 2 dozen lies. Here again we see this striking consistency. It is not a matter of one lie or two. Roger's parents lied to me repeatedly and routinely. They were people of the lie. The lies were not gross. There was not one that could have been taken to court on. Yet the process was pervasive. Indeed, even their coming to see me at all was a lie. Why did they seek my services when they neither had any real concern for Roger nor any real interest in my advice? The answer is that it was part of their pretense. They wanted to appear as if they were trying to help Roger, since it had been advised by his school in each instance. They would have seemed remiss had they not sought attention. In case others might ask, "You've taken him to a psychiatrist, haven't you?" Mr. and Mrs. R made sure they were in a position to respond. "Oh, yes, several times, but nothing has seemed to help." For a while I wondered why they had brought Roger back specifically to me the second time, when our first meeting had not been exactly pleasant for them, and when they knew they would have to face the issue of their failure to follow my recommendations. It seemed like an odd choice. But then I remembered I had been very clear about the fact that I did only very brief consultations. This meant there could be no significant pressure on them to follow through on recommendations. Their escape route was wide open. My schedule fitted the pretense. Naturally, since it is designed to hide its opposite, the pretense chosen by the evil is most commonly the pretense of love. The message Mr. and Mrs. R sought to convey was, because we are good, loving parents, we are deeply concerned about Roger. As I pointed out in the previous chapter, the pretense of the evil is designed at least as much to deceive themselves as others. I am quite certain that Mr. and Mrs. R actually believed they were doing everything they could for Roger. And when they would say, as I am sure they would, "We have taken him to a psychiatrist several times, but no one could help him," they would have forgotten the details of which truth is composed. Any experienced psychotherapist knows that unloving parents abound, and that the vast majority of such parents maintain at least some degree of a loving pretense. Surely they do not all deserve the designation of evil. I suppose not. I suppose that it is a matter of degree, that in consonance with Martin Buber's two types of muths, M-U-T-H-S, there are the falling and the fallen. I do not know exactly where to draw the line between them. I do know, however, that Mr. and Mrs. R had crossed it. First, there is a matter of the degree to which they were willing to sacrifice Roger for the preservation of their narcissistic self-image. There seemed to be no lengths to which they would not go. It bothered them not at all to think of him as a genetic criminal, to blandly offer him up to the designation of hopeless, incurable, and malformed as a defense against my suggestion that they themselves needed therapy. I sensed no limit to their willingness to use him as a scapegoat if necessary. Then there is also the degree, the depths and distortion of their lying. Mrs. R wrote, "I wanted to let you know that we have followed your advice and have sent Roger to boarding school." What an extraordinary statement. It says that I advised them to take Roger out of St. Thomas's when I specifically advised against such action. It states that they followed my advice when they specifically did not. My primary advice was that they themselves have therapy. Finally, it implies that they did what they did because I advised it, when in fact they considered my advice irrelevant. Not one lie, not even two lies, but three lies, all twisted around each other in a single short sentence. It is, I suppose, a form of genius that one can almost admire for its perversity. I suppose also that Mrs. R actually believed it herself when she wrote, "We have followed your advice." Buber stated it well when he wrote of the uncanny game of hide-and-seek in the obscurity of the soul, in which it, the single human soul, evades itself, avoids itself, hides from itself. The most typical victim of evil is a child. This is to be expected, because children are not only the weakest and most vulnerable members of our society, but also because parents wield a power over the lives of their children that is essentially absolute. The dominion of master over slave is not far different from the dominion of parent over child. The child's immaturity and resulting dependency mandate its parent's possession of great power, but do not negate the fact that this power, like all power, is subject to abuse of various degrees of malignancy. Moreover, the relationship between parent and child is one of enforced intimacy. A master could always sell a slave if the relationship was one he found intolerable. But just as children are not free from their parents, so it is not easy for parents to escape from their children and the pressures that their children impose. Another typical and rather intriguing feature of the cases of Bobby and Roger is the extraordinary unity of their parents. Each set of parents functioned as a team. We cannot say that Bobby's father was evil, but his mother was not, or that his mother was evil and his father was just along for the ride. As far as I could tell, they were both evil. So it was also with Mr. and Mrs. R. Both seemed equally ungenuine. Both seemed to participate in a destructive decision-making. Both seemed equally willing to write off Roger as incurable when they were implicated in his problem. There's a couple notes here. I'll read it at the end. The victims of evil encountered in everyday psychiatric practice are not, however, always children. Let us turn now to the case of Hartley and Sarah, a childless couple in their late 40s. I shall describe a single interview that I had with the two of them together. It will demonstrate that the victimization of an adult by evil is in some ways radically different from that of a child. It would also give us a clue to the further understanding of the phenomenon of the evil couple, which we have just been discussing. Finally, the case will reveal a new and puzzling dimension to the problem of the psychiatric classification of human evil. The end of that subsection. Yeah, so the subsection is called The Case of Roger and His Parents within Chapter 3, The Encounter with Evil in Everyday Life. That was really, really, really hard for me to read. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to have a little ramble about it and see what comes up. That was really, really hard for me to read. I've read it before, but I've never read it for an audience. So that has been a difference maker for me. So Ubuntu, thanks for listening. I almost forgot the notes. There's 2 notes from that subsection on pages 121. Page 121. So the first note comes where he says, but just as children are not free from their parents, so it is not easy for parents to escape from their children and the pressures that their children impose. The note reads, if one wants to seek out evil people, the simplest way to do so is to trace them from their victims. The best place to look, then, is among the parents of emotionally disturbed children or adolescents. I do not mean to imply that all emotionally disturbed children are victims of evil, or that all such parents are malignant persons. The configuration of evil is present only in a minority of these cases. It is, however, a substantial minority. The second note is both seemed equally ungenuine, both seemed to participate in the destructive decision-making, both seemed equally willing to write off Roger as incurable when they were implicated in his problem. The note reads, this parental unity will not be surprising to psychiatrists. When we examine cases of child battering, we find it to be the rule that both parents have been involved in the crime. Even in the cases of repetitive father-daughter incest, we usually find some degree of collusion on the mother's part. Once again, I do not wish to imply that all battering or incestuous parents are evil. I cite these phenomena only to illustrate the fact that both parents are almost always culpable in the creation of psychopathology in their children. Those who have read Sybil by Flora Schreiber, yes, Warner Brothers 1974, will recall the truth of this principle. Right, that really is the end. So when I come back, it will be the case of Hartley and Sarah. Thanks for listening.